Hello everyone, this is RC0538 for Couch Commander Gaming. I'm bringing you a different deck. Usually, when I do decks, I usually do a nation or coalition. And that's because it gives me the most activation points, which means I can take more units, have more variety, and get the most out of my deck. Not the case this time. And this time, I decided to take all of REDFOR in a Motorized deck. And in order to get 50 activation points, I limited myself to pre-1985. So, yes, I limited myself, but I feel like this deck has proven itself to be extremely capable, and it performs excellently when put to the test. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show it off. So, first, we've got just some Czech command infantry in an Mi-17. Now, the Mi-17 is an expensive transport helicopter. It very much so is. However, the Mi-17 has these exceptional 122mm rockets on them. 4 HE power with 30% accuracy is excellent, not to mention that they have a 2275-meter range. So now, that might not mean much to most people, but that is the exact range of a Stinger missile. So, at that point, you could actually have a fair chance of, say, killing an Avenger, and I've done it before, where I've actually had Mi-17s kill Avengers because they have 8 strength and a point of armor in the front and on the side. So these things are pretty durable craft. They're also a good support helicopter. And in one time I was using this deck, I had this fly around and basically destroy all of the enemy's artillery. Because 4 HE will get you pretty far. The command infantry themselves are unremarkable. I took them, more so because they had access to the Mi-17. So yeah, there's nothing really special about them. They just have an assault rifle and a medium machine gun, or a light machine gun, I guess, as customary for most command infantry. Forward operating base, pretty standard. And Mi-4, because this is designed for urban maps, and so when I need supplies somewhere quickly, but not, quicker than, say a truck, but still not too fast, I brought in just an Mi-4. These are cheap, they carry some supplies, and yeah, I could have sprung for an Mi-6, but I don't get a lot of them, and these Mi-8s, well, they only carry 500 more supplies for 10 points, but they're also a heck of a lot faster, so there's a case to be made for them. And then, for trucks, I've got the Star, ZAOP. We only get 10 of them, which is a real shame, but I don't get, I only get 8 of these guys, so or just 5 of the normal kill loss, so there's definitely an issue there. So we don't have a lot of logistics, but, it'll have to do. But usually you don't find yourself bringing in a ton of logistics vehicles, so hopefully, you don't run out. If you do run out, well, there's not really any other option. These are the most numerous ones that you get, really. I don't think there's anything cheaper than that we have access to in a motorized deck. So because of that, it's the only options that we have. Now, moving on to infantry. A lot of variety here. Well, maybe not a ton of variety, but quite a bit. First, we have the Sturmpioniere. These are the East German engineer squad. And they have like a tri-barrel RPG looking thing. It's pretty weird looking. But it is exceptionally good at destroying infantry because it has a 15 rounds a minute rate of fire. Not to mention 4 HE power and 35% accuracy means that you're going to be doing a lot of suppression damage and a lot of damage to just normal infantry squads, which is going to panic them, it's going to stun them, and yeah, these guys are exceptional, just normal, normal engineer squads. Now, you could have made a case for, say, the Sapper Z or the normal Sappery. The Sapper Z have the RPO Rice, which the Spetsnaz have, if we take a look at that quickly. The reason I didn't take them was because they didn't have the higher rate of fire. So while they may have higher suppression, they didn't have the high rate of fire, and I wanted that rate of fire. And just the normal Napalm team, I just decided to go for the Sturmpioniere. That was just what I wanted to use. Really, for me, the appeal of the Sappery is usually that they have the BTRT, I believe, and that has a grenade launcher and a ton of armor for transport. Next we have the Komandosi. These are the Polish Marines, and they do a great job in an anti-infantry role because they're very robust at a 15-man strength, and they also carry exceptional weaponry. The AK-74U and RPK tear up infantry squads. So using these commandosi means that you're going to have an exceptional capability for taking out enemy infantry groups. Their biggest weakness and the best way to counter them is with a vehicle, like a tank with more than 15 points of frontal armor. But most tanks are going to have that. Just keep out of range because these have an extended range at 875 meter range, more so than the normal 700 meter range. So yeah, just watch that and you should be fine if you're countering these, but these commandosi are exceptionally gifted at dealing with infantry. So yeah, next for just line filler infantry, I have the Motorized. Now the Motorized are interesting because they're, they're 5 points more expensive than a normal group of infantry, but you are getting a lot more bang for your buck. So I do like the Motorized because they do have that better stats of, say, a shock-trained group, while maintaining good weaponry for just a 15-point cost. So I do like them, considering that they are cheaper than most Blue 4 shock infantry, because most Blue 4 shock-trained, thinking of some of them off the top of my head, like, say, the Panzer Grenadiers, those are going to be like 20 points of their pre-1980s, the 75 version, the 1975 version. So I do like the Motorized quite a bit. Just thinking of them in the BTR-60BB, all of these are really just coming to the some BTR, the Scott 2 here, just because it's cheaper than taking the Scott 2A. But these BTRs, just doing it just a bit of a look at these, they are very good because they have the KPVTs. These are heavy machine guns with a point of armor penetration, and they are kinetic. So as you get closer to the target, you will actually begin to do more damage. These transports are great at dealing with most of Blue 4's, I guess you could say, like, their transports. Because most Blue 4 transports, thinking of, like, the VABs, the Humvees, and such, are only going to be armed with, say, M2 Brownings, or, just medium or light machine guns. They're not going to be the most geared towards taking out transports, just supporting the infantry. The SBW-60 or the BTR-60 takes it to a whole new level because of its because of the KVPT's armor-piercing capability. You can do a lot of damage with these KPVTs. They do an exceptional job at that. Next, of course, people will recognize this, the Spetsnaz. These are, of course, the Soviet Special Forces. And yeah, they carry first the AS-Val, which is just a submachine gun. Pretty standard stats for an SMG, but, high rate of fire, good accuracy. And then they also have the RPK-74, just pretty standard once again for most REDFOR Special Forces, Shock Troops, Infantry. But they also carry the RPO Rice. This has an extensive, that will do extensive morale damage to an enemy squad. Not to mention do a lot of damage to them, and yeah, fires very quickly at good accuracy. So the Spetsnaz are definitely some of the best, if not the best, anti-infantry units in the game. And then to help assist in land grabs, I've brought the FJB-40, the East German, I believe, paratroopers. But yeah, they have assault rifles, just an AK-74, once again pretty standard for most REDFOR units. But it's interesting because they're firing it at 60% accuracy. Not to mention, the rate of fire isn't the best, but like on their bigger brother, the LSTR-40, the more advanced, more modern version. But these guys hold up quite well, to say the least. Decent suppression could be a bit better, but all in all, the FJB-40 are great units. Also because they can engage a tank and they can engage infantry at the same time. And that's something that people will often forget. Like, usually if I have a tank in a forest with infantry, I'll have the infantry engage first, and then I'll move the tank in to support, which usually will tilt the side, the battle in that little skirmish, that battle in my favor, and kill off the enemy infantry. However, if you're fighting FJB-40, the FJB can fire at, your infantry, and the free guy can use his RPG and blow up your tank, or at least do some damage to it. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the FJB-40. So countering it is very difficult. Usually artillery or dedicated anti-infantry forces will eliminate it, though. And so yeah, that basically sums up our infantry section. Moving on to our support section. Some interesting choices in here. First, we have the BM-24. The BM-24 is a multiple launch rocket system that fires napalm rockets. It's good for an area of denial weapon. It's not the best napalm unit in the game. There are a lot better ones. You know, China has one, and there's, of course, the Buratino. But for 50 points, this works. It's best to group these up in, you know, groups of 2 or so, because 12 rockets isn't necessarily enough to cover an area, especially when they have such, you know, I mean, it's decent dispersion, but it's still not the best. So just keep that in mind. Of course, we also have, for long-range anti-helicopter support, we have the HQ-7. Basically, it's the Crotal, just Chinese. And so it has, you know, this great range against helicopters at 3,325 meters, and great accuracy at 60%. This thing will nail your choppers out of the sky before they even know what hit them. So yeah, these HQ-7s are very lethal, and the only problem I have with them is that they only carry 4 missiles. But they do a lot of damage when they hit, and they hit often. So yeah, HQ-7s are a force to be reckoned with when it comes to anti-aircraft. Then we have the OSA AK, just these at the 40-point level, and I took these more so because they're cheap, and because they, well, I mean, they're fast and mobile, so they're able to move along with my infantry to support them. And then we have the PGZ-80. Now, this is an interesting and odd choice. I think many people are either unfamiliar with this unit or think it's just a crappy AA gun. At first glance, it definitely is a crappy AA gun. However, this unit does have, I guess you could say, a hidden gem, and that's it has a 2,800 meter range against helicopters. This means that you're going to be at range with the longest range Blue 4 missiles, being the Hellfires. You know, if you can engage, say, an Apache, even Apache longbows will go down to this thing. And that sounds really odd, but I've done it before. You know, these PGZ-80s will fire at the helicopter. They will do a lot of suppression damage, as seen by this very high suppression, of course. And they usually do 2 HE power, and with the area of effect damage that this will do, it means that you're going to be just sending the helicopter going around in circles, and it'll just, you know, be stunned, panicked, and do that circle and not fire. They won't do anything. And that's usually means that the PGZ-80 is able to do enough damage to kill it, or at least take it out of the battle for a while. And even if these things are more annoying than anything, it at least accomplishes the goal of keeping the enemy choppers off of you. Comparing this to an even more expensive unit like, say, the Shilka, I'd say the PGZ-80 outperforms this in basically every way. One, because it has a much better armor on it, so you're going to be going, you know, be able to take a couple hits. Secondly, because of its high HE damage, it does 2 HE. It's an inferior rate of fire, but it's even faster, you know, than the normal Shilka, than say this Shilka. If you were going to compare it to another, yeah, you'd start to see some, you know, differences. Oh, I'm carrying the Barakusa. That wouldn't be necessarily normal. But yeah, this does have a better range against aircraft. That's one of the big advantages that the normal Shilka will have. But that's not why I'm bringing it in. That's why I have the OSA. And so the PGZ-80 is just to stun and attack enemy helicopters. And if you keep it to what it's good at, then it will not disappoint. Now going on to the tank section. The tank section is kind of difficult. There are some decent tanks that you get access to. But I settled on just T-55s. First, I'm bringing in the T-55 AMV. This one only has a 2,100 meter range on the gun, but it makes up for that by carrying the Bastion missile. The Bastion is a fast anti-tank guided missile that's fired from the barrel. You know, so these both can't be firing at the same time, which is a bit of a bummer, but it works. You know, the accuracy is kind of decent. It's not the best, but it works. And 17 AP power means that you can get some lucky side shots. You know, if you get a lucky side shot, you can do an extensive amount of damage to an enemy tank. And then I'm bringing in the Meridas. Now, the Merida is a very good tank when it comes down to it, because it has a 2275 meter range. The unit I was just looking at here for comparison is the ZTZ-88. This is what I had in the deck before, and well, it has a better stabilizer, but it doesn't have as good, I guess it has the same armor penetration, but, you know, it doesn't have that same range. So if both of these were to engage at, you know, the ZTZ-88's max range, then you're actually going to be able to do more damage when you hit because of that kinetic damage. You're firing a bit slower, but I feel like it's worth it for the extra accuracy. And so on the whole, I really like the Merida. It serves as a great tank with very high accuracy, and that's why I'm bringing it in. It's more of a sniper than it is an actual, frontline main battle tank. But to be fair, none of these really are. I mean, unless you consider, stuff with, less than 10 frontal armor, a capable main battle tank, and so because of that, I'm not using any of those. And I'm just using these T-55s. Well, how much does this is 11 frontal armor, so we do have some, something higher than 10. Anyways, moving on to recon, this is another great strength of a motorized deck, is that you get a lot of reconnaissance, and the recon infantry we have access to is exceptional. So let's dive in. First, I'm bringing in the Planya. This has a grenade launcher, but more importantly has exceptional optics, and it's small. So it's going to be hard to hit, it's going to be hard to detect with its medium stealth, and it's going to be able to see very far. So the Planya is fast, and it's fast. So, it's basically what you want in a recon vehicle. And the grenade launcher means that you can dart in and out of trouble. You can do some damage if you get in a bit of trouble with some enemy infantry. Next, I've got a lot of recon infantry in here. I don't have a lot of infantry in the infantry tab, because I'm not just spamming a bunch of rifle infantry, but I do get a, great amount of special forces also in the recon tab. First, I've just got these shock troops. I'm using them more so, I guess you could say, as spotter infantry, and less, to a lesser extent, than actual infantry. But these guys, they're just pretty standard. They have an assault rifle, the RPG-7, not the best RPG, but, it does some damage if they get in trouble. And they have a light machine gun, just a PKM, pretty standard for most Russian infantry. But what I'm bringing them in is, of course, the Mi-24D, and that's going to go for both these, the Zwidauchis, or Zwidochis, and then I've also got these Specialny Giernatkis. So, I've got both of these coming in these awesome helicopters, which helps make up for my helicopter tab over here. But yeah, these Zwidochis are very good they have very good stealth, they're shock trained, so if they do get in trouble, they can go on the attack in a pinch. You can use these guys as hunter-killer teams behind enemy lines and just kind of cause havoc, but I'd say overall the FJB are better at that, but you can use these guys to spot for them in any case. And that's usually how I use them, as usually just a spotter unit on the front lines, or I send them behind the lines. Usually when it comes to land grabs though, I'll use a combination of the Specialny Giernatkey and the FJB. Now, the reason for this is that neither of them have a great anti-tank weapon, but you do have anti-aircraft capability, you have good anti-infantry capability, and you can deal with tanks if they come, close enough. And so, bringing in the Specialny Giernatkys in the, in the Mi-25 means that you have a great gunship to back them up, and you've also got the infantry themselves. And the gunship, while the Fleta isn't much to look at normal veterancy, you put this thing at elite, and the Mi-24, or in this case the Mi-25, turns into basically a sniper, and this thing will definitely be a problem for enemy tanks if it's at elite. Otherwise, not to say you can ignore it, but it's not as much of a threat, because it's just going to miss a ton. But yeah, these Mi-25s, when, they're also, the other big advantage that you get with these guys is that they are very, very fast at 330 kilometers an hour. But when you're looking at a helicopter that is that fast, it means that you're going to be able to beat the enemy basically to the zone. And in doing so, you can get your troops on the ground first, and to make sure that you're there to counter the enemy heli rush when they come. And then I've got Spetsnaz GRU. Now the GRU are basically just, they're similar to Spetsnaz, but not at all. They're still Spetsnaz, they're still Russian Special Forces, but they carry the RPG-26 instead of the RPO Rice. They carry the AK-74U instead of the AS Val, and then they have the Dragunov SVD instead of an RPK. These guys are decent skirmishers. You can deploy these early on. They serve a variety of roles, really, and they can do that pretty well. Their RPG-26 is decent and pretty good against enemy tanks. The AK-74U that the Commandosi have is very good at dealing with infantry, and the Dragunov is basically a guaranteed hit every time it fires. So yeah, these guys are not bad, and using these guys in conjunction with all of your forces means that you're going to have a great toolkit when it comes to deploying your infantry and using them. The other great thing about having the GRU is that I've brought them in a ground-based transport, so you can use these guys on the edges of towns to help spot for your other units. And finally, I have in the Recon tab for a Recon helicopter, the Mi-24K. The reason I've brought this is because it keeps pace with my Mi-25s, my other Mi-24 in my helicopter tab, and it also has exceptional optics and good armor. For example, if I were to take the Mi-8, it's slower and it doesn't have the armor. The Mi-24K, on the other hand, has the armor and it carries these rocket pods, and by having that, it means that if you have to, you can use your Mi-25s and the Mi-24s, and you can use their mounted weaponry to engage the enemy transports as they come along. Now, they're not going to be able to deal with helicopters that well unless they're just, like Hueys and, Pumas, some of the other, or the Lynx. None of those are really going to be able to hold a candle to, say, an Mi-24 attack helicopter, transport, whatever you want to call this thing. But the Mi-25 and Mi-24 line is going to be able to decimate unescorted enemy helicopter pushes. And that's the great thing about it. And we've got stuff to deal with the helicopter pushes, don't you worry. Moving on to vehicles, I have the Flammpanzer TO-55. This unit has, is just great for denying territory to an enemy. If the enemy is trying to push up, you can just drop some napalm on that position, and you can ensure that if they do try to push across, they'll be panicked and stunned when they try to get there. So in that case, I do really like the, these TO-55s. I'm taking 12 at hardened to make sure that they, I have enough of them, because normally I would spring for having less and taking them at veteran, but there's not much of a need to do so, in my opinion, in this case. There's not much of a need to make it more accurate. You kind of wanted to have a decent spread of napalm, so I'm not taking it, for, at a higher veterancy. Then I have the Concourse, just as a, stay away. I've got ATGM unit. I've got ATGMs, and it works for the most part. You're going to be, able to do decent. You could say the Sturm makes a, better anti-tank unit, and I guess you could say, in some regards you'd be right. It definitely has a longer range and better accuracy while maintaining the 20 armor penetration. But it's slower, which means it's harder to kind of shoot and scoot, if you will. I mean, you shoot the ATGM, it hits / misses, whatever happens, it happens, and then you move away. And that's kind of the advantage of having the Concourse. Problem is that it's not the most accurate, but because we're taking it at hardened, we do get that accuracy boost. Then moving on, we have the ZPT-U4. I use this in my Gun Trucks OP video, in case you didn't recognize it. But these ZPT-U4s, having these 4, heavy machine guns on it, will absolutely devastate enemy transports and vehicles that get too close to this thing. If you thought that the KPVT on these SBWs did a great job, then you'll love the ZPT-U4. It's may have come out in 1958, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad unit. And getting close enough to an enemy vehicle, I've even seen these things kill like Centurion AVREs and, other transports. They're not going to do well against tanks, and they're not going to do that well against very heavily armored infantry fighting vehicles, like Martyr 2s, or even like some of the Bradleys, because they'll just look at this thing, laugh, and fire with their autocannon at insane accuracy and do a lot of damage. But if you can use these guys just to, probe the enemy lines, like I deployed these guys, probed the enemy lines, they didn't have anything, exploited it with the ZPT-U4, and lo and behold, they were able to totally wreck the enemy force. So yeah, these ZPT-U4s are just great all-round support units. And then I've got the ASU-85. ASU-85 is a kind of just an assault gun. I mean, it has a 1925 meter range, and it's basically the counter, if you will, to the ZPT-U4. And the reason I'm bringing in the counter to my own unit is because, well, I wanted to make sure I have some cheap anti-vehicle support that I can put along with my infantry. And using this in that kind of role means that you have a pretty effective unit for doing that. So all things considered, I really think that this has a place. I've seen it do some pretty remarkable things. when you put it in that role. So yeah, I brought in the ASU-85. Helicopter-wise, just looking at it, I brought in the Mi-24 VP. This is a great attack helicopter. And why is it great? Well, one, it has a twin autocannon. Having these autocannons mounted in the nose means it won't have to do some crazy acrobatics to hit the target, and it can just point and shoot. And that's the great thing about the autocannon. These rocket pods are good because they have 2 HE power. They're not as good as, say, the Mi-17s, but you're carrying 80 of them. So, accuracy and, getting some small, high-powered shots off is as important when you can do fire and just lay waste to the enemy. And then we have the Kokon M. I'm kid you not, don't laugh, I have killed Challenger 2s with this unit, and so while this won't be able to penetrate the frontal armor, the Mi-24 VP is more than capable of being able to penetrate the side armor of the tanks. And any hit to the side on a tank is going to be very lethal to it. The Mi-24 VP is very good at taking out the side armor of heavy tanks, and that's why I'm bringing it in. It's a great unit to take out enemy super heavies with. And when you need a good, dedicated, and reliable workhorse helicopter, the Mi-24 VP should be one of the first places you look. The second place you should look is the Mi-24W. When you got targets that just, you don't need to kill with the Mi-24 VP, then you can bring in the Mi-24W. Now, the W is very good because it carries the Yak-B instead of the autocannon. And this Yak-B will even be able to destroy light tanks. Like, I'm not talking like great, awesome light tanks like, say, the M8 AGS, but it'll kill some M41 Walker Bulldogs just fine. And then, of course, you have these rocket pods. They're just small. They only do 1 HE power compared to the 2 HE power of the Mi-24 VP, but they're decent. They're decent. That's what I'll say. And then the Kokon, of course, very similar to the Kokon M. It's upgraded brethren, but the Mi-24W holds up just fine for taking out other targets of importance. Now, I promised that we'd have a unit that could deal with enemy helicopter rushes, and that is the Sokol. Now, the Sokol is good because it carries the Igla missile, first off. The Igla is, a great surface-to-air missile when it's mounted on infantry, but put this on a helicopter, and you've got a good unit that is capable of dealing with the enemy helicopters, mostly because there's a 24-50 meter range. Now, that might not mean much, but considering most Blue 4 helicopter units are going to have, say, a 22-75 meter range, with the Stinger missile, you outrange them, you can get the first shot, and hopefully the first hit off, and thus kill them. And that's the great thing about the Sokol in most REDFOR anti-aircraft helicopters. On the other hand, they also carry a twin autocannon. Now, sadly, this is mounted to the side over here, so it will have to do those crazy acrobatics in order to get the kill. However, they do work out very well when it comes down to it, because you can just lay waste to, enemy helicopters if they're unescorted and just say they just carry a machine gun. Now, suppose those helicopters do land or some infantry survive. That's why you got these rocket pods here. These rocket pods are great at eliminating these stragglers, and, those infantry that have survived will stun them, it'll panic them, even if it doesn't kill them. So all these together do a great job. Another unit you could probably make a case for is the MD-500D AGS-17. It's not a bad helicopter. It carries a twin AGS-17, great grenade launcher, and especially considering it has 2 of them, even though it's a North Korean helicopter, it works out pretty well. And the 50% accuracy isn't something to worry about when you're chewing out, when you're, firing 173 rounds a minute. So, these AGS-17 helicopters are pretty decent and can do a great job. Even just blind firing at a town, you're going to be able to do a lot of damage. So, these are great infantry support helicopters. Other ones you can make a case for are either the Mi-4 or the Mi-25 S-24. This one carries the S-24B missile, which it's named for. This does 10 HE damage and is exceptional at killing off, enemy infantry and stunning tanks and whatnot. But I just didn't bring it. I figured having these other helicopters were more worth it. The Mi-4 is a great, cheap, helicopter, and it's really good at taking out enemy infantry and stunning enemy pushes. So these Mi-4s, well, they aren't the fastest, nor are they, the most armored, best attack helicopters. When used properly, they can do quite a bit of damage to an enemy push. And sadly, we're not able to take a lot of aircraft. I just didn't have the points. There's no way I was going to be able to fit it in. Of course, we took the B5. Well, if we're going to do something in a town, having a B5 is a nightmare for the enemy. It has 15 strength, which means it's going to be tough to shoot down. It carries a whopping, 30 HE bomb, and doesn't have to be accurate. If all it has to do is hit in the target area, and you're going to wipe out tons of enemy units. And if they don't have enough anti-aircraft, you will punish them for it. If you see a congregation of enemy units, even if they're tanks and stuff intermingled, drop a B5 bomb, drop the, 3,000, bomb, and you will wipe out basically everything that's there. And what's, still there, you can mop up with infantry and tanks. One thing to be mindful, though, is that Glorious Leader doesn't have ECM. The Glorious Leader bomber does not carry any ECM or countermeasures whatsoever, because it trusts so much in Glorious Leader that it will trust Glorious Leader to protect him. The problem is that it doesn't have good ECM. It's pretty likely to die if it's, going into a dangerous area, in spite of having the highest amount of strength on an aircraft in the game. So just keep that in mind. Now, I also have the SU-7 BKL. This carries 8 napalm bombs, and it'll drop them pretty close together. And you can really start a firestorm with this thing, and that's why I'm bringing it in. Using this on a map like Wonstand Harbor and napalming the big bridges that the enemy's coming in through, that's going to sting. That's really going to hurt their war effort and ensure that unless they go off-road, which is going to mean that they're not going to be able to capture as much ground, unless they go off-road, their infantry is going to be stunned, panicked, and maybe even will have some kills for the unarmored transport. So yeah, that's why I'm bringing this in. And then for the air superiority fighter, an interesting option, I'm bringing in 2 elite MiG-29 912Bs. And these guys can also double as a anti-helicopter unit. And if these guys get close enough, they can do quite a bit of damage to the enemy aircraft. So MiG-29, it's not the best fighter, but for 120 points, it works out pretty well. When it comes to the naval section, I've brought in the Formosa. Now, the reason I have the Formosa is because these make for great units when it comes to fighting in towns. I just couldn't bring them in, in the recon tab because I wanted to make sure I had some of the other units in there. Mostly because I couldn't remove the GRU because they had the great, they had some of the best AT weapons that I have access to. And the Specionis make for great land grab units with their Mi-25s, and having the Suidochi just means that I have some kind of spammable recon infantry. And so I wasn't able to take them in that section. However, having the Formosa means that I have a great anti-infantry unit in here. Next, I have the Su-27K. This is basically my long-range air superiority fighter. If I'm playing on a map where, I don't have naval, then I don't have a long-range air superiority fighter. It's just kind of the facts of life. It's the facts of war game, because you just can't have everything. And this is something I guess you could say I really need, but I just not able to take. But having these 6 fire and forget Vimples means that you're going to be able to do a lot of damage to, say, any enemy aircraft that's coming in the area. For a more dedicated anti-ship approach, though, I have the MiG-29K. Now, the MiG-29K is very good when it comes to dealing with enemy ships, because you're really able to overwhelm the enemy Seaweeds, especially if we bring in 2 of these guys. They're going to be able to get nice and close. And that's not the best place to be, but, they're going to be able to fire their missiles, get out of there, hopefully, with their 40% ECM, and hopefully overwhelm the enemy's defenses. Now, if that doesn't work, we have the BALs. Now, these guys are good at killing enemy ships. Don't get me wrong. Their biggest problem is their suicidal tendencies. Now, I don't know why you'd put someone, like, you know, make these units this way, but it's kind of strange. These missiles, it's more so not the driver's fault or the launcher's fault. It's the missile's fault, and usually if you fire off a salvo, say you kill whatever the target is in the first, you know, with your first 6 missiles, the other 2 missiles, assuming they fired, usually will go straight into the ground. And when you're dealing with missiles as big as these, that's usually a recipe for your own destruction, and not the enemy's destruction. So, instead of going off harmlessly into the air, maybe hitting a bird or 2, these things can kill themselves. And that's not a great thing to say about, you know, what you need to kill off enemy ships. But I didn't have enough room to bring in actual ships, and I wanted to make sure I had the aircraft, and I needed the Formosa. Well, I guess you could say I don't need the Formosa, but I'd really like to have them at my disposal. So that's how I basically decided and came to the conclusions for the REDFOR Motorized deck. It's a great deck for Wonsan Harbor or some of those other very urban maps. It's going to struggle on some of the more open maps. Don't take this on an open map. However, they do a great job, you know, on, you know, these, you know, when it comes to those urban maps. They do a great job. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. If you've stayed this far, then thank you. If you found this video useful, please like it and share it out if possible. I'd like to get some more people watching these videos. And if you found it helpful, then, yeah, make sure that you send it around to any friends who you might think that this will help. Anyways, guys, this is RC0538, signing off. Have a good day.